Hi there, everyone. Happy Monday. It's 4 o'clock in New York. A twist in the high-stakes $1.6 billion defamation case brought by Dominion Voting Systems against the giant of right-wing media and one of the biggest purveyors of election fraud conspiracies. We're talking, of course, about Fox News. Today was supposed to be day one of that blockbuster trial, but an announcement came down late last night that the start would be pushed back to tomorrow, Tuesday. No official reason was given for that delay. Judge Eric Davis said this morning that it was not unusual for delays like this, but the Wall Street Journal, which happens to be owned by the Murdoch family, as is Fox, of course, reports this, quote, Fox has made a late push to settle the dispute with Dominion Voting Systems out of court. That's according to people familiar with the situation. The Washington Post reports this, quote, two people familiar with the case said the two sides are scheduled to meet Monday to determine if a last-minute deal to avoid trial could be brokered. One of the people said the judge had asked the parties to make a final effort to settle the issue before proceeding with the trial. Now, these talks are happening in the aftermath of a series of rulings that effectively hamstrung Fox's ability to mount a defense. For one, Fox is not allowed to suggest that the lies and conspiracies it aired repeatedly about Dominion were anything other than that. Lies and conspiracies. The judge has ruled this, quote, the evidence developed in this civil proceeding demonstrates that it is crystal clear that none of the statements relating to Dominion about the 2020 election are true. If the case proceeds to trial tomorrow, we could also expect weeks of courtroom testimony from its top hosts, executives, and quite possibly Rupert Murdoch, the head of the Fox empire himself. Now, back to this late night talk last night about a settlement. A settlement would avoid a long and lengthy legal battle, one that Fox News has reportedly been planning to take all the way to the country's highest court. New York Times reports this. Fox lawyers are already preparing for an appeal, a sign they are under no illusion that beating Dominion's case will be easy. At several recent hearings in front of Judge Davis, Fox has been represented by Aaron Murphy, an appellate lawyer with experience arguing cases before the Supreme Court. The belief that the Supreme Court could eventually hear the Fox Dominion case is shared by the general counsel of Fox Corp, Viet Din. Viet Din, who is likely to be called as a witness by Dominion during the trial, has told colleagues privately that he believes Fox's odds at the Supreme Court would be good, certainly better than in front of a Delaware jury. That's according to people who know Viet Din's thinking. Sure to keep a closer eye on whatever happens, voting technology company Smartmatic, which is pursuing its own defamation case, one for $2.7 billion against Fox News. Questions swirling over what comes next for Fox News and Dominion amid a brief delay in the trial is where we begin today with some of our favorite reporters and friends. New York Times political reporter Jeremy Peters is here. His byline is on the Times reporting we read from. Also joining us, Rennell Anderson-Jones, law professor at the University of Utah and a First Amendment scholar. Also joining us, lawyer Lee Levine. For more than 35 years, he has represented media clients in libel and First Amendment cases. We rely on him often, and we will start with you, Lee. What would be on the table for a settlement when everything that is public-facing seems so far apart? Dominion wants an apology. They want it to be clear that these conspiracies were lies. Fox is up and on the air pretty regularly, not really walking too far away from election conspiracies.
Well, I think there are two things on the table, Nicolle. First is money, and the second is what form of statement is going to be made and who is going to make it and where they are going to make it. The money part, it seems to me, is probably the easiest of all of those. Ironically, the hard part is whether or not Fox will be willing to make a full-throated apology and retraction and what the wordsmithing of that will be, and also whether that is just the statement that's issued or whether it has to be read on the air, and if so, how many times, and who has to read it. Does it have to be read on every show that is at issue in the lawsuit? Does it have to be read on Hannity? Does it have to be read on Marita Bartiromo's show? Does it have to be read on Tucker Carlson's show? Those are, I think, the really knotty issues that the parties are probably struggling with right now.
Lee, Rupert Murdoch suggested that Sean Hannity, Laura Ingraham, and Tucker Carlson join hands and recant some of the conspiracies. How does Dominion, in the end, settle for less than what Rupert Murdoch himself suggested?
Yeah, I really don't think Dominion is willing to settle for less than that. And that, I think, is what's holding it up. I think the judge would not have delayed the trial today with the minimal inconvenience that causes to the jury pool if he did not think that they had made some progress. And my best guess, and I have no inside information at all, but my best guess is that they are probably either close on money or have agreed on money. And what they're fighting over are the kinds of things that we've just been talking about.
Lee, I wonder what Smartmatic is watching this sort of 11th hour negotiation and thinking and looking for. What do you think?
I think they're probably opening enough bank accounts to fill with the money that they are likely to get when they're up next.
Oh, wow. What bearing does whether or not this goes to trial, if any, have on Smartmatic's case? Does it make so if Fox is willing to settle with Dominion and it basically did the same thing, some are arguing even more egregious, but basically the same thing about Smartmatic, is that a good sign for Smartmatic that it's in line for a settlement as well, if it goes that way?
Yeah, it's an excellent sign. And I think that Fox has calculated as part of its effort to settle this case that it wants to be done with all of this. So in the calculation, I suspect, is what it will take to settle the Smartmatic case as well.
Jeremy Peters, I know we were having some technical issues. I'm not sure how much of the conversation you heard, but you've done an extraordinary and definitive piece of reporting ahead of the drama. There's always drama when we're talking about Fox News and Dominion. And I wonder if you can just take us through your sort of stage-setting piece about the stakes of a trial. What is sacrificed, if anything, if there's a settlement? Dominion seems to have both a legal mission here, but also a moral one against lies and propaganda and disinformation that has harmed their company and their employees. So take me through where things stand in your view today.
So, Nicolle, you hit on something really important, which is why I think that talks of a settlement are not a little bit overblown. I think Dominion sees this case as something much larger than just $1 billion settlement. It's something very personal, and it's something that means a lot for the country. Is someone going to have to pay a price for the lies that really kind of tore at the fabric of our democracy, that really undermined our very institutions of representative government? And Dominion, from what I understand, is not so eager to just let a dollar amount make that difference. So I think, yes, there were some headlines last night that were, very provocative. And of course, there are going to be talks of this sort in any large, with this many lawyers involved. There's going to be talks of a last minute deal. I don't, at this point, see that coming together. What the judge said this morning, and I was in court, I'm in Wilmington, Delaware right now, and I saw the judge, and he said basically, like, look, this isn't that unusual. There are all sorts of delays. Let's not get carried away here. That my sources are waving me off of any type of talks of settlement. And, I was surprised last night, so let's put it that way, to see those kinds of stories.
Yeah, I mean, and maybe this is a sort of a circular conundrum that Fox finds itself in, because Dominion has made this about, obviously a textbook case where the whole country, all of us are learning. Obviously, Ronell and Lee and yourself probably didn't need the brush up, but the rest of us needed to learn about libel law, the incredibly high bar. the other piece of it for Dominion, in every utterance they've made in the interviews with 60 Minutes, which Lee was a part of that reporting in that piece, was about the cost, about literally the damage that these lies did to this company. There was some great reporting in your piece about how financially secure the company was. So the damages are both moral and financial and brand related. You know, that you move forward. I don't know how many Republican elected officials are going to be standing in line for Dominion voting equipment. I mean, the damages are so real. I can't imagine Dominion having much of a motivation structure to settle. Tell us sort of your take on that, Jeremy, and deepen that thought.
So I think that both sides in this case, Nicolle, have gone to great lengths to try to demonstrate to the judge that they are acting on good faith. And that has been very important to Fox, especially because the judge has reprimanded Fox and he has told them, look, you guys have, you're objecting too much. You've withheld evidence and I've sanctioned you. And I think what could be going on here is that the judge has said, look, you guys just talk. We're about to start a 6-week trial. I'm about to swear in 12 jurors and 6 alternates for a long time. Like I'm sitting here in Wilmington, Delaware right now. I'm about to be here for another 6 weeks, just like the jurors are. Yeah. And it's, he wants to see some type of demonstration of responsibility. And so I think that could be it, that Dominion is really just saying, okay, fine, we will put a good faith effort toward talking about a deal, even if we don't think there is one to be had. But I really do believe that, if this could have been settled, it would have been settled months ago.
Yeah, and Ronell, I mean, strategically, legal and reputationally, that would have made the most sense. I mean, we've already seen all their dirty laundry. We've seen their hatred for Trump. Tucker Carlson called him demonic. We've seen their hatred for their decision desk. They wanted them fired. We've seen their hatred for their own fact checkers. They also worked to get them fired. I want to focus everyone back on the substance of the defamation case. These are some of the clips that we might expect to see in a trial.
We have tremendous evidence already, but of fraud in this election.
The money creating it came out of Venezuela and Cuba. It was created for the express purpose of being able to alter votes and secure the reelection of Hugo Chavez and then Maduro.
It's way beyond what people think, including a very, very dangerous foreign company that did the votes in 27 states, a company that's not American, a company that's foreign, a company that has close ties with Venezuela and therefore China.
Ronell, again, I heard those clips at the time. I remember having to make editorial decisions myself as a host about whether to cover them. There's something different about viewing them in the context of this trial. They aren't sloppy misstatements. They aren't, at least in the case of Rudy and Powell, sort of confused delusions and utterances. They are specific, scripted, intentional lies about Dominion. How central is that to the question that'll be put before the jury?
Oh, it's quite central. It's really the key to Dominion's narrative arc here that we will see laid out, starting with opening arguments to the jury if we move forward with this tomorrow. The real theme here of Dominion's case is that this wasn't just sloppiness or bias or inaccuracy. It was a conscious corporate decision to lie. And I think we'll probably see the table set tomorrow in opening arguments, sort of suggesting to the jury that that's the stickiness of the facts that they're going to have to grab onto over the course of the next many weeks as a piece of evidence after piece of evidence is put before them. The table setting that is going to be happening here from Dominion is really going to be trying to focus the jury's attention on this theme that Dominion believes Fox made a decision to do this, that It saw audiences gravitating elsewhere and wanted to appease those audiences, and then pivoted its coverage to amplify these conspiratorial lies in order to win back that audience share.
Renelle, what is the role of the statements and the things that we've seen from board members like Viet Dinh in proving that inside the mothership, they knew they had a problem, both with the knowing broadcasting and in some instances, I think some of these clips were rebroadcast after they were notified that they were false and defamatory. What is the role of sort of the internal alarms being pulled?
Yes, all of that goes to Dominion's effort to prove up that these weren't just lies, but were knowing lies, which is the critical constitutional barrier that they have to clear. The body of evidence that they've got in that direction includes important internal documents, people in Fox saying different things to each other than they were saying to their audience. But it also includes communications from Dominion to Fox. 19 of the 20 statements here, Dominion says, were broadcasted after Dominion alerted Fox to the falsity of these statements and, sort of pointed it in the direction of accurate information. And so all of that combined is going to be evidence that we're going to see Dominion putting before a jury to suggest a state of mind. Dominion's job here is to show the jury that sort of what Fox knew and when it knew it. And that will be the centerpiece of several weeks of evidence.
Jeremy, I want to put a couple of names. I think viewers of this program have been following your reporting and our coverage closely enough to know some of these figures, but I want you to sort of underscore who they are and how they might be used by Dominion. One is Viet Dinh. This is from his deposition with Dominion. Question: when the executives at Fox News know that hosts of shows are broadcasting allegations that the executives know or believe to be false, in that situation, the executives have an obligation to act, right? Viet Dinh's answer, quote, if they are within the chain of command and if they come to that knowledge, yes. Question, by act, that means put a stop to it, right? They have an obligation under those circumstances, the executives do, in the chain of command to put a stop to those broadcasts, right, sir? Viet Dinh answers, yes, to prevent and correct known falsehoods. I mean, Jeremy, just first, to your earlier point about settling, I imagine Viet Dinh not being deposed and Rupert Murdoch not being deposed are a couple of the things that couple of the sort of milestones along the path that you try to settle before, because their knowledge of wrongdoing on the part of the hosts and the broadcast and their conversations about what executives up the chain of command, and I believe that's another thing Dominion has proven, Rupert Murdoch's firmly established position atop the chain of command at Fox News is incredibly incriminating in the actual malice category, no?
So what Dominion's task is going to be beyond proving just that there was a chain of command there and that, folks who had very senior positions knew what was on Fox's airways was false, is proving that the people with responsibility for those individual shows knew it was wrong. And that's why testimony from people like, Abby Grossberg, who we've talked about on the show before, like she is a producer for Maria Bartiromo, who was responsible for spewing some of the most outrageous falsehoods about Dominion machines. Do people like Maria Bartiromo and her producers, did they know what they were putting on the air at the time was false, or did they have did they act so recklessly and in overlooking the evidence that they acted with, what you're two smarter lawyers than I am about the law on the show will be able to say is reckless disregard for the truth. And I think that that's the easier part of Fox's case, even though you have, Dominion's case, even though you have this ample evidence of the state of mind of these folks like Tucker Carlson, who say, this is bonkers. Sidney Powell is crazy. She's nuts. She's smoking crack. She's smoking on LSD. Like all of that stuff it's good evidence, but ultimately, I think the recklessness here could be what this case boils down to, because, as much as, it's very headline generating and very interesting to all of us to hear what Tucker Carlson said about his guests and what Tucker Carlson said about Trump and being this demonic force and this destroyer and all that. It's going to boil down to very particular, specific instances of recklessness. And it's the kind of thing like Maria Bartiromo saying, with that woman, who talks to the wind, who was her source, right? Like, that's the kind of recklessness I think that this case is going to turn on.
Okay, so Ronell and Lee, if this is the last time we get to talk to you before this trial starts, if it starts tomorrow, just give us a viewer's guide. What are you watching for? You firstly.
I am going to be very interested to hear what Fox says in its opening statement tomorrow. We already know what Dominion is going to say. Ronell, I think, summarized that quite accurately. But Fox has been stripped of so many of the arguments that it has made throughout the case. It cannot argue that it is absolved because what it was reporting was newsworthy. It cannot argue that it is absolved because it was just putting on statements by other people, that is Giuliani and Powell and Lindell. It cannot argue that it's absolved because on other shows they put in some of what Dominion's side of the story was. That leaves Fox with very, very little to argue in the face of the kind of evidence that Jeremy was talking about on the issue of whether or not it published with actual malice. So I'm going to be looking for that tomorrow.
Ronell, you get the last word.
Yes, I agree. I'm especially interested in seeing what themes Fox tries to weave for the jury. I expect that given that it's lost the opportunity to assert some of the key defenses that it hoped that it would be able to assert, it will now have to lean into emphasizing to the jury how hard the burden is on Dominion. So what we're going to see is both cases, both sides of the case being argued from Dominion's vantage point. The question of who knew what and when is going to be at the centerpiece. And we'll kick off tomorrow with some of this important beginning theme setting by both parties, figuring out how Fox is going to thread the needle between conveying the kinds of powerful First Amendment arguments that it wants to make to the jury while not crossing any of the lines that the judge has warned it not to cross is going to be one of the most interesting pieces of tomorrow's developments.
I believe you have all been warned. If not, I'll do it one more time. Please pick up our calls and stay free in the afternoons. Jeremy Peters, Ronell Anderson-Jones, and Lee Levine, thank you so much for starting us off this hour. When we come back, Republicans are back from recess, but many of them spent their first day back in New York acting like they were in the playground, attacking the prosecutor who's aiming to put the ex-president behind bars. We'll fill you in on the latest there. Plus, new signs that the Mar-a-Lago classified documents case could pose a more immediate threat to the ex-president than we realize. What new evidence has emerged in Special Counsel Jack Smith's investigation? And later in the show, how the drip of revelations about Justice Clarence Thomas is painting a damning picture of just how badly the nation's highest court is in need of ethics oversight. The latest very questionable discovery we're learning about today from some great new investigative journalism and much more when Deadline White House continues after a quick break. Don't go anywhere.
Keep up with
abortion bans and restrictions are already a lived reality for millions of people across nearly 20 states.
Keep up with
inflation seems to have at least hit its peak and is no longer growing.
Keep up with
political violence and intimidation. Menace has been cultivated and encouraged by the ex-president to his followers.
Keep up with what matters. Keep up with Chris. All In with Chris Hayes. Weeknights at 8 Eastern on MSNBC. And Why Is This Happening? The Chris Hayes Podcast. New episodes every Tuesday, wherever you get your podcasts.
Like jackbooted thugs, they've descended on New York City using violent crime as their pretext. The MAGA Republican extremists are not interested in gun violence or even knife violence.
Jim Jordan engages in a lot of political theater in Washington, but he should know better than to take his tired act to Broadway.
He said that here in Manhattan, the scales of justice are being weighed down by politics, and they are, but only today.
Got a New York welcome. An overwhelmingly cartoonish plot by the House Republicans backfired spectacularly today. The intended effect, if you haven't heard about it yet, of their field hearing in New York City was to embarrass Manhattan DA Alvin Bragg, to use the city's crime statistics to make a point, which point isn't totally clear to me, about what a DA should be doing with his time rather than investigating and prosecuting a twice impeached ex-president. But instead, the circus the Republicans brought to town raised a much different series of questions, which is this: whether all of this is really what Republicans should be doing with their time, even in front of their own viewers and voters. They got an authentic New York City welcome today in that they were routinely shouted at in the hallway outside the hearing. It's something Jim Jordan could have avoided if he'd chosen a different location, like one with higher crime rates, if that was his ostensible point today, for instance. Or maybe traveling just south of Jordan's own district, Columbus, Ohio, perhaps, where the crime rate is about 3 times that of New York City's. But no, today's clown show was not about violent crime there or here or solving problems anywhere. It was about keeping their boss, Donald J. Trump, happy, about showing him, Donald J. Trump, that no political stunt is too idiotic or petty or nonsensical or illogical or unjustified to appease his badly damaged ego. With us at the table, making his way from Washington with the committee to cover it, New York Times congressional reporter Luke Broadwater. Tim Miller joins us as well, writer at large for The Bulwark. Luke, tell us what happened today.
Well, it was a busy day. There was there's I think more than 4 hours of testimony and argument, and it was a very I would say nasty and heated hearing. You know, there was a lot of really charged language used.
Were there witnesses?
Yes.
Who?
Yes, there were an assemblage of witnesses called by the House Republicans who most of them are outspoken critics of Alvin Bragg. Many of them have, really horror stories. A loved one who was killed in the city, or a relative who was the victim of an anti-Semitic attack, things like this. But they've since become outspoken critics of Alvin Bragg, and so they were chosen for those reasons. And that did present some times where Democrats were saying, at the table, we essentially feel your pain. We understand your case. You've been through a lot, but you're being used here. You're being used as pawns in a political game. And that did prompt some backlash from some of the witnesses who went back and forth with some of the Democrats. But, this was set up with, as you said, with a single purpose to, vilify Alvin Bragg, to make him look bad for as long as they could keep it on television. And to support Donald Trump. And, they definitely got some hours and hours of that in.
And do you know if it was a broadcast on Fox News? I mean, is it actual counter-programming?
Well, I don't know. Remember, they had a whole issue with C-SPAN refusing to carry it.
Right.
And they, I don't think Fox covered it live from what I was seeing.
Yeah,
but
I should have checked. I don't think so
there was
either.
a fair amount of media there in the room. Obviously, the New York media scene is really intense.
Right.
And, there were protesters outside, both for and against what the Republicans were doing. Some people were demanding that Bragg resign outside. So it was really quite a scene.
I mean, if you just do like the quickest bit of staff work, you say to your boss, if it's Jim Jordan, like, hey, dude, crime isn't a super strong thing for us. Maybe we should focus on, something else that Trump cares about. Any response to the crime stats near Jordan's hometown?
Yeah, so there was a bunch of back and forth about crime statistics, obviously, and it was emphasized again and again by the Democrats on the panel, and even Mayor Adams, who had an event before the committee hearing, that New York's one of the safest big cities in the country.
Right.
Yeah, there was an uptick of crime around the time of the pandemic, and that happened in many cities. But if you look at it statistically per capita, all these other cities in the country, it's still one of the top 5 safest big cities in the country, and some years it's the safest big city in the country. New York, for many years, was seen as the turnaround story for big cities.
Right. Rudy was a part of it, frankly, at some point in history. Tim, I wonder if you can take, I tried to sort of establish the facts to to sort of tee this up for you to do with it what you wish. The show is the point, right? And I'm curious. I should have found out before I came on the air if Fox aired it in its entirety. I'm guessing it's more clips for their social media accounts and appearances later in the day on Fox. Anecdotally, any victim of crime anywhere is a horrifically tragic story, anywhere. But in terms of policymakers holding a hearing and trying to advance some policy, New York City is not the best example of if the ostensible purpose was crime stats. I mean, what do you make of their use of the taxpayer dollar on a flagrantly political mission? Yeah.
And here's the thing, Nicolle, as much as this was a total clown show and, Jim Jordan is getting shouted down and called a traitor. And, we saw the intro, just kind of how embarrassing this was. This is one of the better things that he's done since he's gotten the gavel. I mean, by comparison, at least this hearing was about an issue that people care about. Just the execution was horrible, right? Because the details aren't there, right? Like New York, as you and Luke discussed, is very safe on a per capita basis, certainly compared to even big Ohio cities like Cleveland and Columbus, which gave the Democrats an easy talking point, today. But if you look at what Jim Jordan's whole raison d'etre has been since he got in, since the Republicans won the House in November, it's been, we're going to investigate the Biden administration, and he's gone down all these absurd rabbit holes and the Hunter Biden, and, we had the Twitter files, people that came forward, all this stuff that nobody cares about outside of like the Fox News cinematic universe, right? Unless you're watching 10 hours of conservative media a day, you don't even know what Jim Jordan's talking about half the time. At least today, he picked an issue where people understand it. It's like, hey, crime is going up in a lot of big cities. A lot of big cities are run by Democrats. Just happens that New York isn't really one of them. It's like one of the weaker examples to make, but they had to go to New York because what is the real purpose for this? Service to Donald Trump. Yeah. Right? Like if Donald Trump was out of the picture and Republicans, could have a hearing about crime, well, they go to places where the crime's the highest, right? You could pick out plenty of cities in the country that are dealing with crime issues right now. Some of them are run by Democrats, but they can't do that because what this really was an attempt to run cover for Donald Trump. Donald Trump still runs the show. Donald Trump still runs the party, and thus he hamstrings them, and you get the clown show that we got today in New York City.
Let me, Tim, read you on your point about Jim Jordan, some of Luke's great reporting today and profile. Over 8 terms in the House, Jordan has not been the lead sponsor of a single bill that became law, earning him a perennial ranking from the Center for Effective Lawmaking as among the least effective members of Congress. He's also the chairman of a powerful new subcommittee created at the insistence of right-wing Republicans to scrutinize what they call weaponization of government against conservatives, which has yet to produce any new bombshell revelations, despite a budget of $20 million a year. But he measures success in other ways. No single member of Congress has done more to push House Republicans to the right, forcing more mainstream and establishment figures in the party to cede ground to the arch-conservative wing. And where that has brought Republicans in most swing states and districts is to render them nearly unelectable. I mean, the Jim Jordan mission is catastrophic compared to their own last, effort at politicization in the halls of Congress, which I guess is Benghazi. He is a shadow of what that committee was. He's a joke. He's like an incompetent, imitation of what that effort was. And in terms of, so I presume that Luke's reporting is accurate. He's the person most responsible for lurching the party to the right, to the unelectable fringe. It's not working. It accounts for a lot of their less than grand outcomes in the midterms, and it has people from the right and the left at the journalist and operative level very nervous for 24.
Yeah, Luke's article is great. I give him a lot of props for that as well. The interesting thing to me that I found reading it is Jordan really is like this microcosm of the whole party, right? You see there the headline that he's a fighter aligned with Trump. And this whole thing, his whole brand is I'm a fighter. And at least Stefanik's in there saying, I learned how to fight from Jim Jordan and he gave me confidence to fight. But what do they fight for? But that's the thing.
And who are they fighting with? They're in control. I mean, they're so silly. Like they were fighting when Republicans ran everything. What people want when you're in power is to govern. They've never done that.
Right. Yes, right. And this just today is an example, right? If you are fighting for victims of crime, right, you'd be going out there saying, oh, hey, we're proposing reforms, like we're proposing police reforms, whatever it is, criminal justice reforms that we think will make our streets safer. That's not what this is. It's just a big show, a performative show to performatively fight Alvin Bragg. That's what the whole Trump era has been. Like, that's what the parties want. They want people to be this supposed big middle finger to the left, to the people that they hate, but they're not actually doing anything. It's just all of this made for TV culture war, low calorie nonsense. And in this article, in Luke's article, it's like, anytime he had to actually, face real adversity, right? Whether it was the doctor at Ohio State that he was working alongside that was victimizing young men, whether it's Donald Trump trying a coup, whether it's the party going into shambles. He's not taking on any of those fights. He's not fighting Donald Trump. He didn't fight that doctor. He's not doing any of the hard things. It's just all this, I can do a good tweet or a good, have a good hearing performance that makes fun of somebody that my people hate. And that's fighting, I guess, in this sort of distorted worldview. And that's the whole party now. And he's had success within the party because he represents that, even as the party's gotten, smaller and smaller, over the time that he's been, in power.
It's amazing. It's a great piece of reporting. I need you two to stick around a little bit longer. Up next for all of us, Trump lawyer Evan Corcoran reportedly recused now from the classified documents investigation being run by Jack Smith just weeks after testifying in front of the special counsel. We'll talk about the significance of that when we come back. Don't go anywhere. There's some brand new reporting to tell you about that we can add to the pile that has been building over recent weeks of developments and new public-facing evidence, signs, if you will, all suggesting that obstruction of justice charges could be coming in the DOJ investigation into the ex-president's handling of classified documents. The Washington Post reports that top Trump lawyer Evan Corcoran has, quote, recused himself from representing the ex-president, specifically in the special counsel's documents case. More from that reporting, quote, grand jury proceedings are secret, so it's not immediately clear how helpful Corcoran's testimony might be to Jack Smith and his team. But legal ethics rules, including those in Maryland and Washington, D.C., generally bar lawyers from acting as advocates at trial when they are likely to be essential witnesses. Corcoran played a key role in Trump's legal team's communications with DOJ's efforts to obtain documents, including drafting their claim that they'd conducted a, quote, diligent search months before the FBI would go on to find more than 100 documents still in Trump's possession. Last month, Corcoran was forced to testify before the federal grand jury after the judge found investigators uncovered sufficient evidence that Trump had committed a crime, thus piercing that fraud crime protection. Joining our conversation, former U.S. Attorney, former Deputy Assistant Attorney General Harry Litman's here to make sense of it. Tim and Luke are still here. Harry, tell us what to make as tea leaf readers of this Corcoran reporting in the Washington Post.
I think it's pretty big stuff, Nicolle. So first, it is obviously because he is going to be a witness in a Mar-a-Lago case. That's important in and of itself. Second, although the Post says it's not clear what he's going to discuss, I think it is clear. Remember, the very communications he had with Trump, a judge already has looked at and found were evidence of a crime. What crime? Almost certainly obstruction, the very crime that Trump is likely to be charged with. In other words, Corcoran's going to be a star witness for the very charge that Smith is likely to bring when he brings it. And what did the president say to you? And he's just got to fess up with evidence that already has been judged to be more likely than not, and perhaps way more likely than not, evidence of a crime. Finally, the trigger is the trial itself. So that Corcoran decided to do it is some soft indication that they're really anticipating charges from Smith in this matter, because he could have stayed his hand on recusing, even though it was the smarter move after the grand jury testimony.
Harry, there's this in the Post also. Evan Corcoran is still representing Trump in other cases, such as Special Counsel Jack Smith's probe into the January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol, according to these people. Is that normal, that Trump says, you're going to be a witness against me? If I am found guilty of obstructing the probe, it will be in part because of your testimony against me. I think what Corcoran was involved in was something that Christina Bobb also said she was instructed to say. She tried to parse it. Corcoran may be the linchpin between Trump and Christina Bobb. Why does Trump keep him as a defense lawyer in other criminal investigations?
Yeah. Look, he really likes him, and Trump has trouble keeping and like defense lawyers. But it's true because first it makes evidence more probative. Oh, and this is the guy who you're also working for Donald Trump. And again, please, what did he tell you? So that that's one point. And is it unusual? It is unusual, but it's Trump's call. So it demonstrates this isn't a Trumpian fit of pique where he just gets rid of a lawyer. This is Corcoran himself saying, I just can't help you on Mar-a-Lago. At the end of the day, it's going to be awfully ungainly for Corcoran to be involved in other trials. We'll see if he sticks around or has any kind of out front role. But it does show you he's still part of Team Trump, and yet he's going to have to put the knife in because the judges have already ruled that he must testify. It's
got like a historical echo to what Trump wanted Pence to do, even though Pence had no authority to do it. What Corcoran has to do now is tell the truth and abide by the law, especially in this documents case. But Trump may not understand that yet. I want to read a little bit more about how Corcoran came to this place. This is from the Times reporting last month. Judge Beryl Howell's order ruling that Corcoran must testify was said to be accompanied by an 86-page memorandum of law. She found that the Justice Department had met the threshold for having a credible case that Trump had obstructed justice, justifying its request to override attorney-client privilege and require Corcoran's testimony about his role, according to people familiar with the memorandum's contents. So if this has happened and he's recused, Jack Smith already knows everything about these incidents.
Yeah, if I'm reading this correctly, obviously we don't know everything that's happening with the grand jury, but it certainly seems like they are focused very much on this instance about whether Trump lied to them
and told them to lie.
Told them to lie about giving all the documents back, and that Corcoran had to recuse himself essentially because you would have an obvious conflict of interest. So, this to me is a very clear signal about how close they are on this obstruction of justice charge that, Corcoran had to take this step.
Harry, I hate running a clock and asking questions of timing. It's clear that Jack Smith is moving with alacrity, something we talk about a lot on this show. But when you are at the lawyer involved in the alleged supposed crime, where are you in a criminal investigation in terms of making a charging decision?
Really, really close to the finish line now. But of course, Corcoran now testified. It's been a couple weeks. And at the time, I and others said, boy, this shows he must be pretty close. Then we got reliable reporting that Smith had garnered yet more evidence from people around Mar-a-Lago of more incriminating stuff. So he could be putting icing on the cake or building things out more. But it really seems like, I'll put it this way, I'm hard pressed to see important big moves that he has left before putting a package together for the Attorney General's approval.
All right, I got to get Tim Miller on this because this is the case. This is the prosecution that Bill Barr is most enthusiastic about, and I want to ask you why you think that is, Tim Miller. We have to sneak in a quick break. No one's going anywhere. We'll be right back.
Hey, everybody, it's Savannah Guthrie.
And I'm Hoda Kotb, and we've got some great news to share.
The Today Show is now available wherever you get your podcasts.
Can you believe that? Right now, you can get your daily dose of news and headlines and the day's top interviews from us right here every single morning.
We have what you need to start your day, and it's available every day, wherever you get your podcasts.
So why not subscribe and follow today to start listening?
We're back with Luke, Harry, and Tim. So, Tim Miller, the obstruction of the documents case is the piece of the criminal investigations into Trump that is most known because a lot of it's in the affidavit that DOJ releases after the court-approved search. It's also the piece that Republicans feel most comfortable piling onto. Why do you think that is?
I think maybe it's just the cut and dry nature of it, and Trump's behavior is so unique, right? I mean, they're all sort of culpable in a certain way about the insurrection account. The Stormy Daniels thing feels a little fluffy. This is direct. Everyone has to, all these guys in Washington, the Bill Barrs, you say, they all have to deal with classified documents. They all know the rules. And it's like so obvious that he broke the rules that I think maybe they feel the most comfortable talking about it in the most narrow way, right? It doesn't affect their broader political project. But the whole thing, I just have to say, sitting here listening to all this, the craziest part about all this, and this guy is so knee deep in investigations, that there's one investigation where his lawyer is testifying against him, another investigation where the lawyer is representing him, and neither of those are the investigation that he's been indicted for. Right. And he's the front runner for 2024. Sometimes you have to step back and appreciate just how much is coming down on this guy's head. And if you're Bill Barr, who really wants Donald Trump to disappear, finding a case where it's open and shut, that does not have kind of an ideological political bent to it, maybe you hope that Jack Smith can do your dirty work for you.
Tim, do you think McConnell regrets not whipping 10 more votes against indicting Trump in the Senate when he had a chance? I mean, he basically puts this in motion, right? He refers Trump criminally to DOJ to deal with.
He absolutely should. It's all over. I sent this tweet today. There are now 9 senators that have endorsed Trump 2024, 7 voted to convict him, which would have prevented him from running again. So now he's passed the convictors with his endorsements. But those convictors, that was the moment. They were done with him. Of course he regrets it. I think that they made this calculation that the party couldn't have survived because you would have lost the MAGA diehards. But I really don't believe that's true. I think, you've lived through this midterm loss. You see what's coming down the pipe now. He absolutely should regret it. Whether he does, I don't know. He's a stubborn guy, but absolutely. I mean, it's by far the biggest mistake that the party has made politically. I mean, besides just getting on board with Trump in the first place in a long, long time.
Tim, I'm going to give you the last 90 seconds to say something about this incredible reporting from your colleague, Sarah Longwell, I think, about how Trump changed the party. That it almost doesn't matter, right? Like that was the window. And historians will look at that opportunity to convict and be done with him as perhaps the only and best opportunity for the party to move on.
Yeah, Sarah does these focus groups for the Bulwark, and she wanted to kind of take away what she's learned from them. And the main thing is that when you hear from Republican voters, they've liked what has happened since Trump. That might seem insane to the rest of us, right? But that is just the reality. The preponderance of Republican voters like the change. And if you're a Republican who smells like you're from BT before Trump, you don't have a chance in this party anymore. And I think that her article does a great job explaining why that is and where things are going. It's not exactly an uplifting article, of course, but I think it's important to understand where the party is from the mouths of actual voters that she spent a lot of time listening to firsthand.
Yeah, I mean, it's also important as we cover the insanity, as we ask, why Jim Jordan comes up here without any substance when the party's already bleeding voters. It is this box that they're in, that Trumpism is the party. The party can't move on, but it's a real open question whether Trumpism can win any. One
of the things that Jordan said in the article was that the party is now a populist party after Trump, and that's been pretty clear.
It's amazing. It's amazing. All right. Thank you to all of you for being part of our coverage this hour. Harry Livin, Luke Broadwater at the table, and Tim Miller. Thank you so much. For more of our best legal reporting and analysis, sign up for our latest newsletter sent straight to your inbox. You can scan the QR code on your screen right now to sign up now for the Deadline Legal newsletter. Up next for us, another revelation in the mysterious case of the finances of Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas. A quick break for us. We'll be back with that story next.
Now, this isn't some new phenomenon. We've seen justices, both liberal and conservative, promote political fundraisers, speak at partisan events, fail to recuse themselves from cases with pretty clear conflicts of interest. And if the past is prologue, the recent incident that has gained a lot of attention regarding Justice Thomas's family, it won't be the last.
Hi again, everyone. It's now 5 o'clock in New York. A prescient, Senator Chris Murphy, who made those comments about Justice Clarence Thomas more than a year ago. At that time, the senator was speaking about the conflict of interest when Clarence Thomas did not recuse himself from cases around the ex-president and the ex-president's allies' efforts to overturn the 2020 election result, despite Thomas's wife, Ginny Thomas, being an active and enthusiastic participant in the attempted coup plot. Yet as bad as that was, and as Murphy foreshadows there in the clip, it's not the end of the controversies around Justice Clarence Thomas. Seemingly every single day as of late, there are new revelations and new questions about Clarence Thomas's ethics and financial disclosures that emerge, including yet another over the weekend in reporting from the Washington Post. The Washington Post reports that over the last 2 decades, the justice has reported that his family receives rental income from a firm called Ginger Limited. But there's a problem. Quote, that company, a Nebraska real estate firm launched in the 80s by his wife and her relatives, has not existed since 2006. That year, 2006, the family real estate company was shut down and a separate firm was created. Since that time, however, 2006, Thomas has continued to report income from the defunct company between $50,000 and $100,000 every year in recent years. And there's no mention of the new firm, Ginger Holdings LLC, on the forms. Clarence and Ginny Thomas had no response to questions or requests for comment from the Washington Post. Reports over these past few weeks around Clarence Thomas have painted a picture of a justice who seems to not take seriously, or one who is being purposefully misleading on his financial disclosure forms. Let's take stock of what we have learned in the last few weeks. First, ProPublica shockingly reports that nearly every year for the last 20, the Thomases accept luxury trips from their friend and Republican mega donor Harlan Crow. That includes a 9-day trip in 2019 around Indonesia aboard Crow's super yacht. And none of these trips are anywhere on his disclosures. There was also the reporting about actual money exchanging hands between the two. In 2014, Harlan Crow buys the house that Justice Clarence Thomas's mom lives in, along with other properties on her block. Again, Thomas discloses none of those transactions publicly. In fact, since 2004, Thomas has reported receiving only 2 gifts, one of which, a bronze bust of Frederick Douglass worth over $6,000, was a gift from, wait for it, Harlan Crow. Now, Democrats have raised the alarm about these new controversies, these new revelations, all coming out from investigative journalism, saying that the DOJ now needs to investigate. And some have gone so far as to say that Thomas should resign or be impeached. All of this comes as the Supreme Court struggles with and complains bitterly and publicly about having record low levels of public trust. I may not be the smartest person on TV, but I'm going to guess that these revelations are not helping. More questions emerging about Justice Clarence Thomas's finances is where we begin the hour with some of our favorite experts and friends. Brian Fallon is here. He's co-founder and executive director of the Progressive Judicial Advocacy Group called Demand Justice. Also joining us, former RNC chairman and MSNBC contributor Michael Steele's here. And Cecile Richards is back. She's co-chair of American Bridge and former president of Planned Parenthood. Cecile, I want to start with you. You know, I think it's Bob Woodward that says the truth emerges, that eventually this will all come out. Any organization that has been under scrutiny, I've worked in a few of them, has 2 choices to make at this juncture. Do a dump, get it all out, get it over with and rebuild, or just take the cuts, take the pain day in, day out. It is already clear that Clarence Thomas is pulling the reputation of the Supreme Court down with him and is going to die a reputational death of 1,000 cuts.
It is really stunning, Nicolle, that he wouldn't just now come clean with everything. But apparently he seems to think he's above the law. And, of course, this is all feeding into the Americans' distrust of the court that I think largely came out of the Dobbs decision, where you had justices, Republican-appointed justices, who apparently, contradicting their own testimony, voted to overturn a constitutional right that people rightly believed, was a 50-year right that wasn't going to go away. And of course, it was Clarence Thomas himself, in his own concurring opinion, that said, oh, no, it's not enough just to overturn Roe versus Wade. We should look at all the things, all the cases that are based on similar constitutional rationale, including the right to birth control, the right to gay marriage. So it's interesting that this is all coming to a head, and it seems to all be circling around Justice Clarence Thomas.
I mean, Cecile, it does beg the question about how we cover the Supreme Court. I mean, why aren't there cameras in the court? Why isn't there a massive press corps where there is a massive press corps that runs all over Congress that works literally inside the White House? I mean, some of it, right, is on all of us for not asking these questions and following the money sooner. Whatever the reason, it appears to be a new era. In part because of decisions and opinions like what you're talking about. But whether Roberts realizes it or not, whether Thomas realizes it or not, this is a whole different degree of scrutiny on the court.
Absolutely, and should be. I mean, it is. I think there's enormous distrust now about the politicization of the court. Obviously, we have 3 justices who were put on in the most partisan manner by Donald Trump and, frankly, the Republican Party. Their credibility is a question because it seems to all of us that they are making decisions based on their own politics. And in the case of Justice Thomas, clearly with the influence of very wealthy Republican right-wing donors. And they have to come clean. And I think they have to be accountable to the American people who they are responsible for.
You know, the thing, Michael Steele, that voters, even Republicans, can intuit about Clarence Thomas is that his partner isn't like Justice Roberts' partner, who's a lawyer whose body of work is worth scrutiny. It's all worth scrutiny and disclosure, right? These are jobs the taxpayers pay their salaries. They value the public trust so much that they all give public speeches when they have free time about how upset they are that they don't have as much as they used to. So I know they care. But let me read from some of the new revelations over the weekend in the Washington Post about what some of these probing questions have done, the consequences. So in addition to the recent revelations about Clarence Thomas's financial relationship with Harlan Crow, the Texas billionaire, they cited a period in the 2000s in which Clarence Thomas failed to disclose his wife's employment as required by law until the omission was reported by the watchdog group Common Cause. Ginny Thomas earned more than $686,000 from the Conservative Heritage Foundation from 2003 to 2007, according to the nonprofit's tax forms. Clarence Thomas checked a box labeled none for his wife's income during that period. He had done the same in 2008 and 2009 when she worked for conservative Hillsdale College. Now, I don't know any couple that reports none when one member of the couple makes $686,000. That isn't sloppy. That is a lie. Why is he lying on his financial disclosures?
That will be an important question for appropriate authorities to inquire. We can only guess why he checked that. I think common sense kind of tells us why he checked it. He didn't want to disclose it. He didn't want to identify the amount, didn't want to identify where it was coming from. Why? Because the ramifications and the overtones of that are significant for a Supreme Court justice. It doesn't mean that Jenny can't make $700,000 a year. God bless her if she can. But there is a disclosure form for her husband for a reason. And so that is to make sure that we at all times adhere to the proper decorum with respect to ethical representations, lack of conflict of interest, et cetera, to make sure that those of us sitting outside those hallowed halls can look at this institution and the individuals within it and say, you know, those are the good guys and gals. They're doing it the right way. Our politicians may be in the slime bucket, but at least we've got this chamber that is there to be clarifying and clean things up. When the funk is in that house, when the rot begins to seep in, that distrust only amounts, to Cecilia's point, and people begin to, give you the kind of poll numbers we saw, which is very troubling, Nicolle, for the Chief Justice, who does not want to see this institution go this way. The problem he has is that politically, Republicans don't give a damn. There are no Republicans out here crying for an investigation or looking to get answers from Justice Thomas. Probably a lot of them have been at these events with him, where dollars were spent to get him and maybe them there. We don't know, because we don't know if there's not the proper type of oversight and ethical requirements in place to make sure that these types of things don't happen. And finally, I guess when you look at it, in terms of the responsibility of the press, the one thing I would say is, in the past, this was always boring. This was a boring detail. Everybody kind of waited to June before the press got hyped up about the Supreme Court. Now, boring has been replaced by words like distrust, has been replaced by words like political. And we'll see now if that coverage increases, unlike it has in the past.
Michael Steele, if Atlantic Kagan's car broke down and George Soros gave her a ride to the next gas station, there would be Benghazi-style hearings in Congress. It's not that Republicans don't care about a lack of ethics. You talk about a lack of conflict of interest. Thomas is a walking conflict of interest. He is in charge of whether or not he recuses from the Trump cases. Ginny Thomas testified before the 1-6 committee that she, and I think she calls him her best friend, that he knew what she was doing. I mean, this is so many train stops beyond, well, it's a conflict of interest. And of course she can earn money from Heritage. My question isn't about the $686,000 she earned. It's about the flagrant lie about it. What is the remedy? And are you at all optimistic that there will be one for a justice that lies?
I'm not optimistic that there will be one. Where's it going to come from? You know, where does it come from? And, you know, the chamber should be policing itself, I guess. But absent that, who's going to do that? It's going to fall to the political class, the politicians on Capitol Hill, the House and the Senate to weigh in. That's not going to germinate out of the House. This House is not going to put that kind of ethical check on the Republicans in that chamber. Now, if this were a majority Democratic, and I hate to say it, but we all know it's true. If it was a majority Democrat appointed, court, yeah, then you're absolutely right. Everybody would be getting earfuls of condemnation and whataboutism and screaming and hollering and all this other stuff. But that's why I said the Republicans don't care about this to the point where it's going to lead them to take the kind of action to avoid it getting worse in the future. And I just don't know how you break that open right now. Where's that ethical reform going to come from? You know, how much of it will the Chief Justice be able to implement? How does that process work? What is the rationale for the court not even being under the same umbrella as every other federal judge in the system? What made them so special that ethical requirements weren't a mandate for them? These are the types of things that, as a country, we have to begin to explore and understand in order to move forward effectively. But the politics is going to get in the way here.
Yeah, I mean, Brian Fallon, I think even Democrats on the Judiciary Committee are pretty clear-eyed about what Michael Steele is saying, and maybe not yet publicly, but well, I mean, Senator Blumenthal was pretty public that short of a Senate impeachment process, there's not a lot that Democrats can do without Republican participation. But the person who is standing at the gateway and the precipice of something he can't come back from is someone who knows better, and that's John Roberts. And I wonder if you think that the ground has shifted underneath him in a way that he has detected.
I think that if we put all our eggs in the basket of hoping that John Roberts is going to properly investigate one of his own, then we'll be left disappointed. Clarence Thomas, in one sense, Nicolle, he is a creature of a broken institution. He's the longest tenured justice that's currently on the court. And he has become a creature of that institution in the sense that he's seen Scalia take these junkets funded by wealthy donors. He knows how lax the ethics standards are. He knows there's no code of ethics. He knows there's no governing authority that can properly investigate sitting Supreme Court justices. So he's clearly willing to get away with as much as he'll be allowed to get away with. And the Republican political class, as Michael Steele was just saying, is definitely circling the wagons around Clarence Thomas because, Nicolle, he has become a sort of mascot for the new conservative legal movement. It's been said for a while now here in Washington, D.C., that if you want to know where the mainstream of conservative legal thought will be in 5 years, read Clarence Thomas's dissents. It used to be his dissents. Now it's his concurrences, and in some cases, quite frighteningly, his majority opinions. But he has long been a thought leader during the days when Anthony Kennedy was still on the court and was trying to trim the court sails and have it proceed more incrementally. It was Clarence Thomas who was throwing these bombs, signaling that there could be a day in the future where they might overturn Roe or that they might allow an unfettered right to carry firearms in crowded U.S. population centers. And that day has now arrived. And when you look at Donald Trump's record of judicial nominations, there is not a single other Supreme Court justice that had more of his former clerks appointed to the federal bench by Donald Trump than Clarence Thomas. That is how deeply enmeshed in our current federal judiciary Clarence Thomas and his progeny are. And so the leading group on the right, Judicial Crisis Network, promoted a big biographical film about Clarence Thomas just 2 years ago. He has supplanted Scalia as their most revered figure. And so they're definitely going to circle the wagons no matter what kind of disclosure comes out about him. And so we can write letters to John Roberts asking him to investigate this, but he's not going to do it. We can call for impeachment. We can call for resignation. It's not going to happen. There's two people that will decide whether anything comes of this. One is Merrick Garland, because the failure to disclose this land deal from 2014 is a violation of a 1978 law that would give ground for Merrick Garland to launch an investigation here if he had that sense to do so. And that's one option. Secondly, it's Dick Durbin. And yes, they can't move an impeachment resolution. That would have to start in the House. And with that being controlled by Republicans, there's no hope there. But Dick Durbin could investigate these things. He has subpoena power. He could hold hearings about this matter. That Post report over the weekend, Nicolle, that shell company that Clarence Thomas is still reporting income from, there's a lot of questions there. Is that just a clerical error where he refused or mistakenly forgot to update the name of the LLC on his disclosure forms? Or is that a shell company that other donors like Harlan Crow are using to funnel contributions to Clarence Thomas to influence him? He doesn't deserve the benefit of the doubt on that. We should investigate that, and Dick Durbin has that power.
Let's have a really blunt conversation about those two men. They do have power. They have a moral compass. They're good public servants. Brian Fallon, let's start with Merrick Garland. If he won't impeach Trump, who basically live streams his crimes, what are the chances that he opens an investigation into Clarence Thomas?
Yeah, I think I would answer that question two ways, Nicolle. One is there appropriate grounds here for a federal investigation? And the answer to that is clearly yes. And then there's a second question of whether this particular Attorney General, Merrick Garland, is willing to do that. And that's, I think, what you're getting at with the premise of your question. And in one sense, he's a former federal judge himself, Merrick Garland, on the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals. And so, would he... and probably has a personal relationship with Clarence Thomas, probably is running the same circles with him as two judges in the upper echelons of the federal judiciary. So would he probably be loath to do that? Probably. But look at how quickly he's acted to appoint a special prosecutor in what I think is a far less merited case of Joe Biden's classified documents. Whereas here, I think that the circumstances are screaming for some kind of accountability or some kind of investigation. It came to light today, Nicolle, in the CNN story, that his mother has continued living there rent-free all these years. So even if you wanted to initially defend the transaction by saying that Harlan Crow, the donor, paid a fair market value for the house, it defies belief that his mother has continued living there all these years without paying a single rent payment. How is that not considered an undue benefit flowing to a public official? I mean, you have a clear case here, I think, of corruption, and it deserves to be investigated from some quarter. If not DOJ, then the Senate Judiciary Committee. Either of them have the power to do it. Either of them, I think, would have the public's backing in doing so.
Yeah, Michael Steele, I'll give you the last word on public sentiment. I mean, the difference is permitless carry, which the Supreme Court helped usher in as the way of life in these United States. It's like a 70-30 issue. 70% of the public opposes it. Abortion, another 70-30 issue. The difference is Clarence Thomas may be held in high regard by the conservative legal community, but that community is more distanced from mainstream American thought, including mainstream Republican thought, than at any other point in modern political times. What do you think the sort of opportunity is for Durbin or Senate Democrats to hold some oversight hearings?
I think the opportunity is high. The politics are ripe from the Democrats' perspective because of, as we've seen with Dobbs and the outflow from that in Kansas City, a special election, et cetera. Mm-hmm. The public is paying attention, Nicolle, and they are very much aware. And they know that, despite what people may think about our public, the public by and large know the various stair-step roles and responsibilities. So they understand the Supreme Court is an end point, it's not a beginning point. So these cases that flow up to them germinate someplace, which is why you're hearing more and more now conversations around what happens to change the court, right, down the road, the steps you got to to be taking at the federal level, state level, et cetera. So the politics are moving. The question for Senator Durbin and the Democrats in the Senate is, how do they craft that narrative, especially if Merrick Garland takes the pass, which I think at this point he probably will. I think the other side of that on where Garland moved before, the politics are very different than they are here on the Supreme Court. So I think Durbin will look at this at least in the short term to see what more flows out of it before he pulls the trigger.
Well, investigative journalists are not waiting. There's a bombshell a day. It's really stunning. And we owe them a great debt of gratitude for a lot of what we know about the Thomases. Brian Fallon and Michael Steele, thank you for being part of this conversation. Cecile Richards sticks around when we come back. It may seem counterintuitive at this point, but the Texas judge's ruling banning medical abortion may not be the slam dunk to survive that some on the right think it is, even if the conservative supermajority of the U.S. Supreme Court is as anti-abortion as we believe them to be. We'll explain all of that nuance next. Plus, country music superstar Brad Paisley is just back from a secret trip to Ukraine. He met with President Zelensky. Brad will be our guest later in the hour, along with another dear friend of our show, former Zelensky advisor Igor Novikov. You don't want to miss that. Deadline White House continues after a quick break. Don't go anywhere.
I'm Brandy Zadrozny, a senior reporter for NBC News. Do you remember the name Tiffany Dover? You might have heard of her back in 2020. She was one of the frontline medical workers to receive the COVID vaccine when it first rolled out. But when she got her shot on a local news live stream, she fainted, and a conspiracy theory was born. The video of her fainting lit up the internet, and Tiffany Dover, a nurse from Tennessee, became a weapon in a global misinformation war. After that, she disappeared from public view. Her social media went dark, and she never spoke out. Until now.
I wanted to tell my story. I'm so happy to finally be telling it.
Tiffany Dover breaks her silence for the first time. You're not dead.
I am not dead.
Her side of the story, and why we haven't heard from her, in a special episode of Tiffany Dover is Dead, an NBC News podcast. Listen now.
A sense of outrage that a judge with no medical training would have the audacity to override a decision of the FDA.
I thought we were making progress for a long time, and now I just see horrible, horrible backsliding, and I could not stay home. And I couldn't live with myself if I stayed home when this is going on.
When it comes to women's rights, it is imperative that we stand up and take them. It doesn't matter if you're left-leaning or conservative-leaning. It just matters that you are a woman, because these are human rights that are being stripped away from us.
Indeed, those were protesters outside the United States Supreme Court this weekend, outraged and focused over the attempts to further roll back the right of women to make our own decisions about our bodies and our health. The Supreme Court could rule on the legality of the most common form of abortion and miscarriage management medication as early as Wednesday of this week. And while the expectations of the court that stripped away, as Cecile said earlier in the show, a constitutional right, the right that we've had for 50 years to an abortion, might be that they will continue to run roughshod over the rights of women and girls in our country. A legal analysis by the New York Times suggests that we should at least pay close attention this week, and reports that even the increasingly far right-wing majority might shy away from such an extreme ruling for these reasons. Quote, at first blush, the decision's chances of surviving review by a Supreme Court dominated by conservative justices seems quite promising. But legal scholars said that the poor quality, breathtaking sweep, and unknown collateral consequences of the Texas decision might cause at least some of the Supreme Court's conservative justices to wait for a case that would allow them to make or take more measured steps. Quote, if you're a justice looking for a case in which to undermine the administrative state, this is not a particularly elegant one, said Mary Ziegler, a law professor and historian at UC Davis. Quote, everything about this case makes it an imperfect vehicle, except for the fact that it's about abortion and the administrative state. This is boundary testing. Joining our conversation, President and CEO of the National Women's Law Center, Fatima Goss-Graves. Cecile is still with us. Fatima, Wednesday is such an important day, so much on the line. I'm not sure if I welcome being lulled into feeling open that the Supreme Court might not do the worst thing on the menu, but this reporting suggested that we should at least wait and see. What are you expecting? What are you bracing for this week?
I definitely think there's a possibility we will find ourselves in a good place on the other side of this decision, in part because this case had no business being there in the first place. The people who brought this case, it's outrageous that they have standing and that it wasn't dismissed out of hand. And the effect of this case would make the FDA an inability to trust in the decisions that it makes. It would totally blow that up. So the court has a lot to consider whether or not it is going to uphold either the Kaczmarek or the Fifth Circuit reasoning, which really puts judicial reasoning in place of scientific reasoning.
Yeah, Cecile, I mean, this is a case about a judge for non-medical purposes taking away a medicine that has been approved for 23 years by the FDA. It seems like a catastrophic legal thing for the Supreme Court to get behind, but then they did Dobbs. So I don't know where I come down. What do you think?
Well, Fatima is exactly right. This case should have never been heard. There is no medical evidence that there is any reason for this drug to not be available. As you said, it's been available for decades. Has an incredible safety record. But now the question is, yes, can one federal judge appointed by Donald Trump somehow override the entire FDA process? And that's why I, too, am hopeful that the Supreme Court will actually balk at this. It's interesting, Nicolle, as you know, this case has not only united women across the country, it's also brought the medical community and the pharmaceutical industry in the same place, saying we cannot actually take away the right of the FDA to license medicine in this country. So just like the Dobbs decision was overturning a 50-year constitutional right, this would be a radical rewriting of what the role of the federal judiciary is. So we'll find out, I think, probably on Wednesday. But I, too, like Fatima, am hopeful that reason might prevail.
You know, I mean, Cecile, I try to always press on the ground reality for women in America. I mean, without mifepristone as part of the 2-drug regimen for miscarriage or abortion, isn't women's health care less than with it?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, none of these decisions are being made and none of the cases are being brought on behalf of women or women's health. As Fatima and I know, that's never been the case. The goal of the Republican Party has been to end all access to safe and legal abortion. And it's interesting because, of course, part of the supposed rationale in the Dobbs decision was that this should now be a 50-state decision. Each state would make their own rules. But this kind of case is exactly is basically contradicting that immediately, which is this case. If Judge Kaczmarek is successful, this case would say no person in the country could access mifepristone, even if you live in a state that has completely legalized abortion. So it is this incremental fight by the Republican Party, frankly, to just undermine access all across the country. And, you know, I've been spending time in Louisiana, a state where there is no access to safe and legal abortion anymore. And if mifepristone is taken off the market, it will be devastating for the health and well-being of women everywhere.
You know, Fatima, we have these conversations with people like both of you, again, to keep them rooted in the reality. But the reality is it is already a worse place to be a woman. They have already succeeded. And my question, Fatima, is do you find that men and women everywhere you go are aware of the fact that they are still pushing, that they want more, that they're not happy overturning Roe?
I think this case has put a fine point on that. This is not a state-by-state idea. This is actually a backdoor effort to do a nationwide abortion ban. So there may have been people who were in a state like New York or California that's been expanding access to abortion care that may have been thinking, well, I feel bad about what's happening in Louisiana, but that's not me. And I hope this moment helps everyone realize that their end game is to ban access to abortion and actually control our lives and futures everywhere and in every part of this country, no matter where you sit.
It is an unbelievable and inconvenient thing to wrap your brain around, but it is the truth. Fatima Goss-Graves and Cecile Richards, thank you so much for being part of our coverage. When we come back, a critical point for the people in Ukraine. Two of our very good friends, country music superstar Brad Paisley and former advisor to President Zelensky, Igor Novikov, will be our guests for a conversation following Brad's visit to Ukraine last week. Don't go anywhere. They'll both be here when you come back. So it's been about 2 months since here on Deadline we played for you a brand new song from our friend Brad Paisley. The song was called Same Here. It was released on the 1-year anniversary of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. It features a surprise performance and appearance from President Zelensky of Ukraine. While Brad was on this show, he dropped in that he was going to Ukraine to meet Zelensky in person. Well, it happened just last week. That plan became a reality. Brad joined a bipartisan group of U.S. senators on a trip to Kyiv as he continues his work as an ambassador for United 24. That's a fundraising campaign that helps to build housing for displaced Ukrainians whose homes have been destroyed in the war. During the visit, Brad also got to perform Same Here in Kyiv's St. Michael's Square. Here's some of that performance.
However you talk, whatever you think, from the songs that you sing to the drink that you drink, miss your mama, worry about your babies and love each other like crazy. Want someone to share your hopes and fears. Sing.
If you can listen to that and not cry, you can come host the show for me when Brad and Igor are on. Joining us now, Grammy Award-winning singer-songwriter, superstar Brad Paisley. Also joining us, our dear friend Igor Novikov, former advisor to President Zelensky. Brad, tell us about the trip.
Well, first of all, I know you're jealous. I got to hug Igor before you.
Totally jealous. Right?
And it was an amazing moment when it's an overnight train ride in, and we got to the place we were meeting in the morning, and there's Igor waiting for me. This guy that, as you know, has been such a conduit between us and Kyiv, and for me it was such a shock to see it for my own eyes, because it's always different than you think it will be. I knew it would be different. I knew it wouldn't be just the things I've seen on television and in coverage. And what I was absolutely floored by was the way that they are living life to the fullest between air raid sirens. And I saw kids getting off of school buses in raincoats and with book bags. I saw people walking in the park. I saw people in restaurants. Meanwhile, we're driving around in armored cars, and they are defiant, and they're living life to their fullest. And meanwhile, those who are fighting are fighting. Those who are living are busy keeping the lifestyle going.
Brad, did it inspire a creative process? Did it inspire more activism? Is there a real understanding that this is the time to pay more attention, not less? I mean, tell me because you're not a sort of see it and leave guy. Like, how did it change you?
It is the type of thing where I'm not exactly sure how it's changed me yet. I'm still processing. I got back emotionally exhausted in a way I have never been. And again, some of the United 24 folks showed me around when we first got there, and we walked feverishly to the places they thought I needed to see. And there was a place where there's an intersection there in Kyiv that was hit with a missile while people were in their cars. And within 4 days, I think that's right, Igor? They had it fixed and they were driving on it again. And that's their whole philosophy. And so you leave there thinking, with these obstacles and this kind of determination to be a democracy and to be free and to expel the invaders, I just left there thinking there's got to be more we can all do. But at the same time, I just left there feeling like it's a great feeling to know that we are on the right side in this country. It's truly inspiring to see them wanting to be free and as much like us as they can be.
Well, like the best of us, Igor. I mean, I think this thing that Brad describes is something that you've tried to bring to life for our viewers. And I think we've talked on and off TV about, if it's the last day of your life, how do you live? What do you drink? What do you eat? Well, how do you talk to, and it's incredibly intense. It is probably along the spectrum of PTSD, surely. But it sounds like Brad saw some of what you've described. Tell me what life is like in Kyiv right now.
Well, Nicolle, I have a story for you. If you can see I'm slightly shaken, it's just because I got off a phone call. I was shown an interview by a Russian Wagner mercenary, and it aired today. The guy confessed to executing 20 Ukrainian children in Bakhmut, including a five-year-old girl, and he describes it in full detail. And look, it got me thinking, here's the Ukrainian mentality for you. First of all, we see the clear picture. So in a world like that, there are only three types of people that can exist, human beings, monsters, and cowards. And cowards are just, monsters in waiting. So, who is pretty clear to us. But also at the same time, it doesn't lead us to hatred. It leads us to, more activity. More can be done to make a world a better place. So, for example, as soon as I finished watching that interview, I came up with 3 ideas to pitch to Brad, one to pitch to you, an op-ed that I started writing with my friends at Air Media about social responsibility of everyone who has a voice, so musicians, actors. And look, I'm going to show what life is like in Ukraine to as many people with audiences and voices as I can. And that's our mentality. Sooner or later, this will be over, but we need to make sure it doesn't happen again, because this is beyond evil.
And I think if Brad and I could throw a parade for you every day, we would. But I will just go back in time and remind everybody how this all came to be. You and I were texting and talking a lot at the beginning of the war. Igor, you said, "Where's the we are the world?" I call Brad the next morning on a Saturday and I say, "Brad, can we do We Are the World?" He puts me in touch with David Wild, and off to the races we go, trying to do something to help. So when Brad says you are the conduit, Igor. And I think to Brad's point about how it changes you when you see it, how do we work on that front? How do we make sure more people see not just the horrors like what you're describing, but the resilience, like the intersection Brad's describing, both sides, all sides?
Well, that's the thing that's most beautiful about Kyiv, and I'm pretty sure Brad can tell you all about it, because he's not biased as much as I am. But at the same time, look, there's so much beauty in this city and resilience, and seeing it is one thing, and we're trying to get as many YouTubers in, as many celebrities in as possible. But what's important here is to relay that message to the world. And there's nobody better positioned to do that than somebody who's as talented as Brad, for example. So the song is incredible, and I'm so looking forward to the music video. I'm not sure if Brad spoiled the fact that a bit of it was filmed in Kyiv as well, but maybe I just did a Tom Holland again. I'm sorry about that.
That's all right. So you guys hug. No, go ahead. I want to also put you on the spot and ask you about meeting Zelensky. I have to sneak in a quick break, though, before I do that. You guys, please stick around.
Hey, everybody. It's Savannah Guthrie.
And I'm Hoda Kotb, and we've got some great news to share.
The Today Show is now available wherever you get your podcasts.
Can you believe that? Right now, you can get your daily dose of news and headlines and the day's top interviews from us right here every single morning.
We have what you need to start your day, and it's available every day, wherever you get your podcasts.
So why not subscribe and follow today to start listening?
So, Nicolle, we're here in Kiev with Brad, and I just wanted to say hi to you and thank you for making a lot of this happen, for inspiring people.
All of it. And I can't believe I'm standing next to him before I get to stand next to you.
Well, same here.
Right.
Anyway, Nicolle, we'll see you soon. Bye. Bye. Bye.
I watched it like 10 times. I didn't know they were going to play it, but I'm so glad they did. So that both of you are changing the world makes me so happy. But I do want some more gossip, Brad. I want to hear about your first conversation. President Zelensky has been he's on your record. He's on your incredible new album. What was it like meeting him for the first time in person?
It was, it was surreal when you think back to what led to all this, which is, for me, watching this entire conflict begin came from a call from, I got a text from Mark Kelly, Senator Mark Kelly, who I went there with, who said, it was something like, buckle up, Russia is invading Ukraine. And to fast forward to a trip with Mark to Mark and Senator Manchin and Senator Murkowski, who are all wonderful people. And we had so many experiences we will never forget. But to fast forward to this moment where I got to meet him, he's exactly what you think. And in that sense, it was really kind of surreal to be able to walk in and already have a history with him without ever having been in the same room. And one of the first things I said was, I hope you like the song.
He likes the song, Brad, right?
Yeah, he does. Yes. But it was really interesting to talk about some certain things. We got to have some conversations, and I was in there a while. So it's like to be able to discuss the smaller things, the family things, the things that all human beings have in common, kind of like the song says. It really was something I'll never forget. And one of those moments where I feel like Forrest Gump. I don't know how I ended up there.
Brad, you both have young kids, and so much of what President Zelensky's speeches call on us to do is to act like our kids are watching, right? Not to kick them out of the room. And so much of what Igor's talking about is the inhumanity, the monstrosity of the Russians. How much of President Zelensky's skill at sort of bringing us all to attention and bringing out, when you sing Amazing Grace, right? It's about this war starts and you look at your kids and it's about the world we want to leave for them. That is the universal thing that the three of us talk about off TV. How much is Zelensky also sort of reaching back to the kids in his own country and reaching out to the adults around the world to try to hold all of us together for the cause of democracy?
I think he knows exactly that, especially coming from the entertainment world as an actor and a comedian. A good friend of mine says all the time, do not underestimate the resolve and the grit of a comedian, of a person who's able to look at society and find both the humor and the irony and I feel like that tool for him has allowed him to find the way to get the emotion that we need. And there's no comedy in what he's doing at all, but he has found a way to appeal to our hearts. And I think that's probably why the song happened. I think he understands that things like art can reach the places that cold hard facts and speeches and data don't.
Yeah, it's the gut piece, right? Elections aren't determined by anybody's heads. It doesn't make them go stand 11 hours to vote. It's what you feel in your gut. I wonder, Igor, I think your frenetic effort to pull helpers like Brad into the conversation comes from this understanding that it is our guts and our commitment to you and your kids that keeps us in the fight. What is your thought at this point in the war about that?
Well, Nicolle, look, first of all, Masha, my 3-year-old, is a constant daily reminder that, we need to keep going and win this regardless of what happens. But we need to build a wall, but this wall should not be between countries. This wall should not be between, city, state, anything. That wall should be the wall of love between us and the evil that happens to be in this world. And it's the human connection. It's kind of getting to know new people because we're all the same, and I'm kind of stealing from Brad here, but that's really important. The more good people we connect all across the world, the more protected we are and become from evil. So.
You guys make me cry. I'm ready to get a break because you both made me cry. Are you going to go back, Brad?
Oh, yeah. I don't think that was my last trip. I fell in love with that city. I can't wait also to see it once the veil has lifted a bit on this. It's going to be, I think the St. Michael's Square, when you stand there, it's like they're already getting it ready for this memorial to the war they won. That's my hope.
And you will perform there when they unveil it. I know it. And we'll all be there. It's so nice to talk to you. I wish I could say, Brad and Igor join us now every day. Let's do this more often, friends. Brad Paisley, Igor Novikov, Thank you so much for spending time with us. A quick break for us. We'll be right back.
However you talk, whatever you think, from the songs that you sing to the drink that you drink, miss your mama, worry about your babies and love each other like crazy. Want someone to share your hopes and fears. Sing.
Thank you so much for letting us into your homes during these extraordinary times. We are grateful.
Hey, everybody, it's Hoda Kotb.
And Jenna Bush Hager.
And we got big news, y'all. Our show is now a podcast.
That's right. You can take us anywhere you go, in your car, to the gym, even just at home on your own couch with a glass of wine.
We like spending time with each other, and now we love that we can spend even more time with you. Are you sick of us yet?
Don't be, because you can never have to miss a moment of fun, laughs, or friendship.
Yeah, subscribe. Listen to Today with Hoda and Jenna wherever you get your podcasts.